If you have recently been diagnosed with ADHD, if you're wondering if you have it, if you are a female who's wondering why all the ADHD content has always been about boys, if you are a type B girly who feels like there's not a place for you, welcome to my corner of the internet. My name is Victoria. I am the host of Hot Mess Habits podcast. I am a wife, a mom, a content creator, a photographer, and overall just an ADHD multi-passionate girly who's trying to live her life. I make content all about productivity, lifestyle, and just approachable advice for the everyday girl. I thought that when I started my podcast and this journey that I would start with this episode, talking about like my journey with ADHD, how I got diagnosed as an adult, what my life was like before, my journey with medication. But then when I was thinking about the logistics of just like talking about all the things, it felt a little bit overwhelming and a little bit like personal. I also feel like there's a lot of banter on the internet these days about like, oh, people don't actually have ADHD. Like everyone has ADHD these days. They're just like being dramatic and people need to just be like, stop being so addicted to their phones. Is that true? Sure. People need to stop being so addicted to their phones. Do we all have a shorter attention span these days? Yes. However, being diagnosed with ADHD was something that was very impactful for me. So I feel like this is more vulnerable for me to share. And that's why I kind of, I guess, shied away from it for it being my first episode. So here we are. I think this is episode 6 now. So we've worked our way up a few episodes. I probably just should have started with it because then it would be buried on the internet and I would never have to look at it again. But here we are. This will be obviously a little bit of a different episode today. There's not going to really be any like key takeaways. It's just going to be more so my perspective and my journey. And I hope that it is impactful and inspiring, especially if you are someone who also has had or also has ADHD or is wondering if they do or just like wants to hear the perspective. And I just feel like it's always interesting to hear people's stories and where they're coming from, especially when you are taking advice from them. Being able to see like where they came from and what has got them to where they are now is always interesting and impactful. So here we are. So we'll see how I decide to tell this. I probably will end up jumping around a little bit just because that is my personality. I can't really tell a story completely straight in a line. So we'll see what happens. So when I was growing up, I was very much a girl who, when I was growing up, I'm the eldest daughter. So I'm the oldest in my family. And I feel like I wear that as very much like a part of my personality, being the oldest. And I always wanted adults and anyone older than me to like me. And not only like me, to praise me and to think that I was mature. And so I would say from a young age, I acted and carried myself older than I was. And I liked being able to kind of like chameleon myself into age groups that were older than me. I felt like I could very much like observe and understand what was happening and get myself into situations where I was with people that were older than me. I also really wanted teachers to like me. I very much am someone who wanted to do really well in school. That was something that was very important to me. A lot of my worth was attached to how well I did in school, and that was from a very young age, like kindergarten. And so I wanted to do well, but I always would struggle in school to meet deadlines and to do things in a timely manner. I also got quite restless in school. So I have a very specific memory when I was in I think I was in grade 1. And I just would get so restless. And so I remember I would lean back on my chair. So I'd kind of like push my chair back and then go forward and then push my chair back and then go forward. And I just remember, I don't remember if my teacher gave me a warning or not, but my teacher took my chair away because she was saying that I was being distracting. And so I got my chair taken away and I had to sit like on my knees for the rest of the class, which I don't think they'd be allowed to do anymore. But that is a very specific memory to me that stands out because I just remember I just couldn't sit still. I always had to be doing something. In my class, there was kids that did have diagnosed ADHD even from like younger ages. And I feel like they were restless in a way that felt different than me. Like I was never I was never crazy. I was never like, me doing that chair thing was more like, it was subtle. Like I wasn't jumping off the walls. I wasn't like crazy. So that's what I feel like, that's how girls kind of slip through the cracks, is that, you know, I can't sit still, but I'm not being like disruptive. It was just probably annoying the teacher. As I got older, as things are continuing through my childhood, I just remember never being able to like meet a deadline in school. So I would always use procrastination as my main motivation. So if I had to do homework, I would always leave it till the night before, the morning before, and use that little like burst of energy, procrastination, like need to get it done to complete it. And often I was able to do it. And so that is what made these tendencies like not problematic, is that I was still able to do the thing, and I did like well in school. So it was kind of this thing where, you know, wasn't necessarily good, no, but it was allowing me to like, I would still do fine. So it wasn't like hurting me. I also realized that if I could get teachers to like me, that it would help. Like I feel like they would have more compassion for me. So there would be times when I couldn't meet the deadline, but because I was like on good terms with the teachers, they would like, you know, bend a deadline for me, or they would feel like sympathy for me and like kind of help me out. And so that was like, I feel like I wouldn't ever say that I struggled through school, because I did quite well in school, but I would feel like I was always looking for like these like loopholes in order to do well and in order to succeed. And so that was always kind of confusing to me, because I'm like, am I a good student, or am I just like, am I bad? Like, or am I not a good student and I'm just using procrastination and the fact that my teachers like me to get through? I also remember from a young age being very much like, I've never been a super tidy person. I definitely like, especially my room will get messy really quick, and that's always been a thing. But then what will happen is I'll get this like burst of motivation, and so it would be like, I'd be little and my room would be a mess, and then I would suddenly get this burst of motivation, and I remember I had this like point and shoot film camera, photographer from a young age, and I had this point and shoot film camera, and I would take before and after photos of my room, because I was like, I'm gonna organize this whole room today and we're gonna take photos. So I would like take before photo, my desk would be like a disaster, and then I would clean it up and take another photo, and I like just could not stop doing that. I was like hyper fixated on like, my room is going to be clean, we're going to document the whole thing. And I just, also hilarious because it was film, like none of that was instant. Then I would have to go get those photos developed, and like for what I don't know what I did with those photos other than just be like, cool, my room's clean. But anyways, so that was like my little hyper fixations that I would get on, where I was like, go from 0 to 100 of like, I'm a mess. I need to clean and organize everything right now. I do give a lot of credit to my mom, because she was someone who really, I feel like, helped me maintain my ADHD symptoms. So because I was very like forgetful and disorganized and everything, and my mom is the opposite. She would be very good at like trying to help me stay organized, try to help me remember things. I'm sure that there was many times when she would be frustrated at me for being so disorganized, for forgetting things. But she was really good at being on top of me about things and making sure that like, you know, are you getting your stuff done? There's a moment in I don't remember how old I was, but in my teenage years where I was like really wanting to do this math course by correspondence. So basically where you don't go in class, you just do it all self-paced online. That was a lesson I will never forget, because I should not be someone who does things self-paced like that. So basically it was supposed to be like a math class over the course of a semester, and I just didn't do it. Like I was just like, oh, I'll do it. Like I'll do it when I have time. Yeah, I'll do it. And it just kept getting like pushed back. And then suddenly it was like I had 3 weeks left to do the math course, and I had to do the entire math course. And I just remember my mom finding out that like I hadn't done it, and her being like, okay, like you are going to do this math course. Like you need to sit down and do it. And so I was literally like, did not leave the house for 2 weeks, because I was doing this math course that I had procrastinated over the course of like 6 months, and I had to do it all within 2 weeks. And that just shows my procrastination, and when things don't feel like a priority to me, they just get pushed to the back of my mind. So yeah, my mom was someone who definitely really kept me on track through my childhood and teenage years. And I didn't really realize that she did that until I left the house. There have been many other moments where just like I just can remember throughout my growing up where I felt like I couldn't retain information in my brain, or like I just was not aware of things around me. So there's just many things that I broke or things that happened where like I just was not paying attention, and I just would get frustrated with myself of like, why was I not paying attention? Like, is everyone else like this? So I left the house when I was 20 and moved out, and I knew that it was going to be an adjustment. Like, obviously I feel like everyone, when they move out for the first time, it's like an adjustment, and even in the moment, I couldn't really put words to like what I was experiencing, but I do feel like there was this big level of shock when it came to moving out, in terms of just like managing a house, making meals for myself, trying to keep myself on pace. And so many things happened during this year where like, you know, I'm in my own space for the first time. I'm newly married for the first time. I was working full time as well as doing school. So it was just like my life had a lot of things going on. And that is something that I kind of like simultaneously, I think, because of my like hot mess type B self, like it kind of is encouraging for me, or it's like I like the concept of like having lots of things on the go. It's like something that is like I enjoy it, because I hadn't done that really without support. It just felt very overwhelming, and I realized like how much I was relying on like my mom or other people to keep me on track. And when I was just kind of like to my own devices, it was just like, okay, whoa. Like I remember, so when I was in school, I think I was late almost every single day. I would be late for my work and I'd be late for school. And the person I was working for at the time was very laid back, and also I feel like, anyways, he was very laid back. So he just kind of like, he didn't care that I was late. So then that also was a bad combination of like, he didn't care that I was late, and I was very bad at being on time for things. So it just was a kind of like allowed me to continue in this pattern. I also, just for school, I remember always being late. And so because of all of these things, I felt like I was living a very, very anxious life. And so I was just always on the go. I had terrible habits. So I think also because I was living on my own for the first time, I felt like, oh, I have so much freedom. I can do whatever I want. I could scroll my phone as late as I want. I could go on my computer. I could watch movies. I could stay up late. And like, there's no one to tell me that I can't. I don't have a curfew. Like all of these things. I was finally given this freedom. And so I really went with it. But I feel like it made me live just such a stressful life. A little while later, I also started my photography business. And then that added a whole new level of craziness. I feel like looking back as someone, I feel like there are a lot of people that have ADHD that are entrepreneurs because they are able to like set their own deadlines, set their own schedule and everything. But in this like early phase, I turned into such like a workaholic and was very hyper fixated on my business and getting things going. And I would be working so late at night, and I just feel like my brain would never shut off. So I would remember just laying my head down at night, and my brain would just race for hours and hours and hours. So then I would wake up and I would just have like coffee for breakfast because I was so tired, and then that would make my mind race, and then I was just in this constant state of anxiety. And so I really was convinced at this time, like there is something wrong with my brain. Like I am not able to function. I don't get how all my friends are just like showing up for their life. They're not late for their jobs. They don't procrastinate everything. They're able to like maintain a social life. They're able to maintain their jobs. And like, I just don't get how I can't do this. And I just felt so isolated and alone. And like, I was the only person that felt like this. And so I was just like, there's something wrong with me. So over the next few years, I went through this, like just continually in this type of cycle of just like feeling like there was something wrong, I would do all of the things. This is also at the peak of like kind of like hustle, not the peak of hustle culture, but this is when like Rachel Hollis was very popular. Jenna Kutcher was like the most amazing person to walk the earth. And so I was listening and consuming so much like self-help productivity advice, but a lot of it was very much just like, from my perspective looking back, was just like, just get up and do the things, get up early and just stop feeling sorry for yourself and do it. And I feel like I would try so hard to do all the things they would recommend, and not just like Rachel Hollis and Jenna Kutcher, but like all of the productivity. I was listening to all the podcasts, all the things, and I would try to do all the things, and I just couldn't implement them all. I felt like, why can I not just stick to like a morning routine? Like, I would be able to do it for a few weeks and then I would fall off, and I would be able to, I would be consistent at one thing for a couple months and then I would get bored. There's been many businesses and side projects and ventures and things that I've started, and I had so much like passion and momentum and excitement for them at the beginning, and then it would kind of be like, I'm bored and I would taper off, and then I would feel awful and feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Everyone knows that I can't just stick to something. This is so embarrassing. And then I'd be in this place of shame, and then I would feel depressed, and then I'd be like, wait, do I have depression? Like, why do I feel so sad and so sorry for myself? And like, I can't get out of bed. Like, what is wrong with me? So I was fully convinced over the next like few years that I had like anxiety and depression, because I just would get in these cycles of feeling super anxious and feeling in this kind of like crazy state. And then I would crash, and then I'd feel so depressed, and I just felt so alone with it and so frustrated. So when I was like 24 is when kind of things started to get to this breaking point. I had a really I have really severe skin condition, and I had a couple years where it was like very chronic, took over my entire life. Anyways, that's a whole another tangent, but I was at my lowest point, and it was really, really hard. And during this season, just coincidentally, I was during the season was when I first kind of started seeking out some mental health support and going to a counselor, because I was just like, I was doing so poorly in life and things were really, really rough, physically with my condition, and then also mentally, just like everything had stacked up, and it was just like, I could not function. I could barely get out of bed. I still would try, but it was just like, I felt like I was a shell of myself and just not at all who I wanted to be. This is the part where it feels like disingenuine to talk about to talk about TikTok, and the fact that like the reason I first started thinking I might have ADHD is because of TikTok, because the way that sounds just so ridiculous and makes me feel like that it should not be credited, because TikTok's not a reliable source, but this is the truth, and this is how I was able to get my diagnosis. Was just, I was on the side of TikTok where they were talking about what ADHD could look like in women, and I had never felt so seen in my life. I felt like every single symptom, every single thing they said was like someone had been reading a book that had been written about me and my childhood and the things that I had experienced. And it just, with where I was at in my life and how low I felt, I was honestly kind of like, could this be an explanation for the way that I feel and for all of the struggle that I've had, all of the things that have been like made things so hard for me? Like, is there an explanation beyond just me being a failure? Anyways, but the list there on TikTok consisted of like, you're super forgetful, you aren't able to pay attention, you have extreme mood swings, all these things that were very true to my life. And looking back, like, I say that I was like hopeful and I was like, oh, maybe this could be an explanation, but I was also very like, I don't have ADHD. Boys have ADHD. Those like the crazy boys from elementary school that were bouncing off the walls, like those are the ones who have ADHD. Like I don't have ADHD. And I'd always thought of ADHD as being like very hyper, very like very how it is portrayed often with young boys is like, you know, they're bouncing off the walls, they can't sit still, like those types of behaviors. And I was like, I've never really been like that. So I don't have ADHD. Then from that TikTok, I went and started researching like ADHD in women, inattentive ADHD, which is a specific like type of ADHD, and realized that like, okay, there's so much more to this than I thought, and contemplated for a while, like doctor and everything about it. Eventually decided like, yeah, no, I think that this would be a good idea for me to talk to him about it. So I made an appointment with my doctor. This was during COVID, so I didn't actually ever see my doctor in person. It was all like over the phone or over Zoom, which was weird, but it was fine. Like I think that it helped me honestly be able to feel more comfortable talking. So we talked on the phone for quite a bit, and I was able to just kind of share like, yeah, this is the reason why I think I have it. I've been really struggling, and I think that it could explain a lot of the reasons why I'm struggling. And he was like, yeah, I can totally see that. Like we talked a lot about like, because one of the things with ADHD and getting a diagnosis is they want to know that it's not just like a recent thing that's been happening to you, that it's been something that's been like present since childhood, which definitely mine had been. And so we talked through that a bunch, and then he's like, okay, I'd love for you to do like an assessment. So he had me do an assessment just that like he was able to conduct, and we went through that, and he's like, oh yeah, I definitely like I matched with, I don't know how many on the scale or how many of the questions and things, like I was like 90% or whatever on the thing. Then from there, he's like, I can't technically give an official diagnosis. It needs to be done through a psychologist. So I got referred to a psychologist, then was on the waiting list for her for I think like 6 months. Honestly, not as bad as I was expecting, but I think I saw her after 6 months. And then we started I think I had 6 sessions with her where we just talked through different scenarios, what I was going through. It was kind of like a mini like counseling session. And so we talked through everything, and then through that process was when she gave me my official like diagnosis, and she's like, yep, you have ADHD. It's definitely mostly the inattentive type, which will bring, I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Like not paying attention, not being aware of things, all that type of thing. Initially, when I first got diagnosed, I feel like the thing that was the most powerful for me was having language to describe certain things in my life that before I feel like didn't have an explanation, or I just felt very like a lot of shame around. And whereas once I got diagnosed, it was like, oh, okay, there was some reason behind it. It's like, okay, I'm impulsive, and I'm an impulsive spender and a little bit spontaneous because I'm seeking dopamine and being aware of that. Okay, I'm inattentive, so I'm not great at paying attention. I need to do things to help my brain focus. I need to watching my brain either like try to seek dopamine or not be able to function because there's a lack of it was very powerful, and it made me feel a lot less alone, and like there was an explanation for it. Also, when I started to kind of like look on the internet and realize that there was other people that struggled in the same way I did, like exactly the same way, not just like, oh yeah, like, because sometimes I feel like I would talk to people and I'd be like, oh yeah, like I'm really like struggling, like I just can't do this, like I can't keep my room clean, I can't stick to a morning routine, like I literally can't do it. Or like responding to my text messages, I'd be like, oh, like I literally just cannot, there's something like a block in my brain, like I can't do it. And they'd be like, oh yeah, like I miss a text too sometimes, like I usually respond after 2 days. And I'm like, oh no guys, like I don't respond for 3 weeks, like I can't function. Like, so being able to have just like the language around it and know that I wasn't alone was a really big thing. When it comes to medication, I did try a couple different doses of different medications during when I first got diagnosed. So I wish that I had written down exactly which ones I had tried. I think they are written down somewhere, but it's not really important. It's just like I tried a few different things and it was not working. I also am on medication for my skin condition. So I was like, my first priority was not to be on medication. Also because because at that time we wanted to start thinking about having kids. I just chose like, you know what? And you cannot, on the ADHD medication, you cannot be pregnant. So I was like, you know what? I think that I'm going to take a break from meds. So I tried a few different out. They weren't working. I'm like, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to try to do some research and manage things on my own. It's just so crazy what having the knowledge around, learning about yourself, learning the way that your brain works can allow you to just feel so much better about things. At the beginning, there wasn't really anything that much that I was changing. It's not like at the beginning I was like, okay, I'm changing my routine. I'm doing things completely different. I'm doing things like in a whole new way. It was more so just being able to give myself grace for the fact of like, you know what? It's okay that I do this. It's okay that my brain works like this. We're going to release the shame of it and we're going to just move forward from here. That was just very powerful for me. And I think that getting my ADHD diagnosis kind of counteracted a lot of the anxiety and depression that I was experiencing. I do think I definitely lean more towards being like, I am quite an anxious person. And I think that's something that's just is part of who I am. But I do think a lot of the anxiety and depression I was experiencing was like a side effect to my undiagnosed ADHD. So it was more so like I was going through this ADHD cycle where I would like get very motivated, be able to do things for a while, then fall off, then feel shame, then feel depressed, then I'd get back on. So it was kind of this like constant state of like anxious, depressed. Whereas when I was able to identify that as ADHD, and then that's just part of like who I am, the way that my brain cycles, a lot of that anxiety and depression was able to like chill out a bit. Yeah, so I got my diagnosis. It's been 2 years or almost 3 years since I've gotten my diagnosis, and it's definitely been very helpful. And since then, I've been able to just structure my life and think about things in such a different way and realize that I just need to do things differently to make sense for me. And yeah, I've learned so much along the way. That's what this whole I started talking about it a little bit on TikTok. I never wanted to make it like specifically for ADHD because I do think there is definitely people that have like type B tendencies, as I would describe it, that don't have ADHD but are just more like an unorganized type. So that's why I started my TikTok channel originally, and that's why I'm here talking, and just so that you feel like that this is a safe space for you and that you don't have to do things exactly as everyone else does in order for them to be right, in order to have a wonderful life, in order to have good habits. You can still succeed and grow, even if you have ADHD, even if you're not the most organized girl ever. That brings us to today. I hope that me sharing a little bit with you today is inspiring, is encouraging. I'm always open for like questions or anything like that. If you want to know more, have questions specifically about things, or you're wondering for yourself, feel free to reach out. Again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you're following along, subscribe. New episodes are going out right now every single Monday. So we will see you again next week. Bye, guys.